Welcome to Personal, the podcast where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I'm your host, Charlotte Nichols, and I'm really excited to meet the real Lisa Gosnay, who is a communications, marketing and strategy freelancer. Lisa, how did it feel to find out that you were seriously ill?
Indescribable, really. Like a complete bolt out the blue. I've used words like having the rug pulled out from under me. Yeah, just, I couldn't believe it. I tell you what I felt like I'd been picked up and plonked in a parallel universe. So everybody else around me, because I'm sure we'll get into it, but it happened literally overnight. Everybody else was continuing to live their lives as I had been the previous day. And literally overnight, my life changed forever.
Were you feeling poorly?
Yes, but not. I didn't realise. And it's really common for people with either blood cancer or serious blood disorders, which is what I had, to not realise. They just think they're overworked, they think they're overtired, and you almost miss a lot of the symptoms and just put it down to the fact that you've pushed your body a bit hard and, you know, or, like I say, overworked. So after my diagnosis, on reflection, when I looked back, there were symptoms, but I never, ever thought for 1 minute that I just thought I was tired.
What a shock.
Huge shock. At the time, I was 29. My career was flying. I was in education. I started as a teacher in education, but I got into senior leadership very quickly. My career was flying. I felt completely invincible, indestructible, and literally overnight, I was seriously ill.
So you literally thought, I'm feeling a bit tired, maybe I'm lacking iron, let's have some blood tests.
Yeah.
And literally, what did they come back saying?
So I was tired, but I didn't actually go to the doctors to say I was tired. I went because I had a rash on my feet. A bit random.
Yeah.
I returned from holiday. It was May half term. You live your life by school holidays when you're a teacher. I'd been in Tenerife for the week with family, and I came back, was at school one morning, the Tuesday morning, I think, and I said to a couple of colleagues, have you seen my feet? And I had these like pinprick rashes on both the tops of both feet. And one of them, both of them, but one in particular really said, you need to go to the doctors. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, really? Anyway, I got an appointment that day. The doctor said to me, have you had tight shoes on? No, I haven't. Well, you're bleeding under the skin. That's bleeding under the skin. A little bit like you would get, the meningitis, like that.
Yeah.
We just need to do some blood tests. Sure, it's nothing. We'll do some blood tests. So there was nothing urgent. They were just going to check me out. It was the first blood test I'd had in my life at 29. And I had that the next day just because that was the first appointment that was available. But it wasn't urgent. There was no urgency there at all.
Not even from the doctor at that point?
No.
Okay.
No, it was just go back to reception, book in with the nurse for a blood test. So I did that. It happened to be the next day. Went and had the first blood test of my life, age 29, and didn't really think anything more of it. Went back to work. I taught year 11 GCSE kids, so I often had them back after school. I had children back after school. They went, and at 5 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my GP, and his words were, Lisa, I'm really sorry. I didn't expect to have to tell you this, but you're seriously ill and you need to be at hospital within the hour. They're waiting for you.
My goodness. And that's when you were literally floored.
That was it.
Yeah.
Literally from a minute phone call, that was and my life was never the same again after that point.
What was your next step as soon as you put the phone down?
My next step was to ring my brother. So we'll get to it later, I'm sure, but I was divorced. Mm-hmm. So my next of kin, if you like, my contacts would be my parents and my brother. My parents were away. So I rang my brother, who was on the way home from work, and I said, are you driving? Because I didn't want to say that to him, while he was driving. And he came to get me, took me to hospital. I was at hospital with a Tesco bag for life within the hour, just completely like, what on earth this is ridiculous. It's a total overreaction. There's nothing wrong with me. They proceeded to take multiple vials of blood off me. They told me they were testing me for AIDS and all sorts of hepatitis, all the spectrum of things that could possibly be wrong with your blood. And that was it. I was admitted to hospital.
And what were you actually diagnosed with?
I was diagnosed the next day following a biopsy of my bone marrow. They were originally looking for leukemia, and I was instead diagnosed with aplastic anemia.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So if you the best way to describe it is blood cancer, leukemia or any form of blood cancer is where you have too many bad cells in your blood. Aplastic anemia is when you don't have enough good ones. So there was no cancer. Effectively, my bone marrow, which is your factory that produces your blood, had broken down and stopped working. So I just wasn't making blood at all in any way, shape, or... Well, I was making it, but nowhere near enough to sustain my life, I guess.
Yeah.
So
That's scary.
Well, yeah, because you just take it for granted that you've got this blood going around your body, and it's like, you know, they say the lifeblood. That's because that is what it is. So they gave me this preliminary diagnosis very quickly, which is sometimes unusual. And by that night, I was hooked up to my first ever blood transfusion. I had 2 bags of red blood cells. Since then, I've had over 100 bags of blood product. So that was 2011. So in the last 13 years, I've had, I don't know how much, it's at least 100, there's more. And yeah, and obviously then from that day onwards, my journey and my life changed forever.
So you're very grateful to blood donors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't realise how much you need blood.
No.
But not only, you know, with aplastic anemia, there's a real common misconception that you're anemic. So you're iron deficient, and it's absolutely not that at all.
Yeah.
I couldn't make enough red blood, which meant the oxygen wasn't carrying around my body effectively. So I was out of breath, extremely fatigued, and dependent on typical red cell transfusions. I also didn't have enough platelets, which are clotting cells. So I was
That's pretty important.
Yeah, risk of hemorrhage, big risk of hemorrhage. And I had very limited white cells as well, which meant I couldn't fight infection.
Yeah.
So someone with aplastic anemia has a deficiency of all blood cells, which is what makes it so serious.
And at this point, are you feeling poorly as well?
No. Not really. I probably was, but I think this decline was over a long period of time. I was bruising.
Right.
I was tired. I was breathless. I'd had a couple of dizzy spells. I hadn't been picking up lots of infections, which a lot of people do. But I wasn't. I just thought I was a workaholic. I did 70-hour work weeks as a teacher, which is not uncommon in education in the UK. And I just thought I was tired. We just had an Ofsted inspection,
right,
which is another story altogether. And I just thought I was exhausted, really. And, you know, I'd pushed myself. And I genuinely, to this day, believe that I might already have been predisposed to aplastic anemia, but I think that the way I approached my lifestyle in terms of how much I worked, I pushed my body to say, no, enough's enough.
Yeah, because that was going to be one of my questions, almost like, can this disease strike anyone at any time? Or do you have certain genetics that could switch it on if you are perhaps working so hard?
I think there is some elements. I think they do test your genetics, but 80% of cases are idiopathic, which means there's no known cause.
Okay.
Sometimes they're triggered by exposure to chemicals or viruses, so people can have hepatitis and it can trigger aplastic anemia. I believe some people may have had it triggered because of COVID as well.
Right, okay.
But the vast majority of us, there's no known cause.
No family history for you?
Nope.
No.
I've got distant relatives that have had blood cancer, but it's not blood cancer, so no, nothing.
So how long did you fight the illness for?
So I fought it on and off I support, am I still fighting it?
Yeah, that's another question.
Well, I'm really reticent to say I'm cured because I'm in what they call hematological remission.
Right.
So I had some treatment very early on. Actually, it's 13 years today.
Oh, wow.
Since my first round of treatment. So I had some chemotherapy type treatment. I had 2 rounds of that as an inpatient in hospital, over one in summer 2011 and another one in summer 2012. That got me into remission.
Right.
So my bone marrow started working again as a result of that treatment. And I wouldn't ever say I resumed a normal life, but I was able to do a lot more. I didn't need transfusions to keep me going or anything. And that got me about 2018, I got to, and I relapsed in 2018. So in between my treatment in 2011, 12 and 2018, I gained an element of normality back. But I pushed myself again, and we had an Ofsted inspection again. And within 2 months of the Ofsted inspection, I was starting to relapse. So I relapsed in 2018 into 19. And then 2020, 21, I had stem cell transplants.
Right.
And I had one, it failed. I had a second, and that has worked. And I'm in what they call remission. I make all of my own blood exceptionally well now. And I'm as well as I've been for a long time, and all being well, fingers crossed and everything else, that'll be the case for a long time to come. There's lots of people that have had stem cell transplants and gone on to live. You know, I'm at risk of potential long-term effects because stem cell transplants are hard going on the body, really hard going. But there's no reason why I shouldn't go on to live a fairly normal life from here on in.
Wow.
In absolute technicolor, might I add, because once you've had the exposure to that level of serious illness, you live your life a lot.
You appreciate every day.
Yeah, completely.
Oh my goodness. And I take it, how do you feel now? Can you appreciate how poorly you were in that moment now?
Yeah, and even so I spent the best part of 5 months in Freeman Hospital in Newcastle during COVID. So I had my first transplant in September 2020, and then that didn't work out. So then I was readmitted fairly quickly and had a second one in January 2021. So from September 2020 to February 21, I spent the vast majority of that time with a couple of bits at home in hospital. And even when I was in it and I was and apart from when I felt really, really bad and I was bedbound, I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't shower myself, I couldn't get to the toilet myself. I don't think I quite realised how poorly I was because you just get through the day. There was a particular period of time across about a month where I was severely ill. I'd been in intensive care. I couldn't get out of bed, and that was really, really hard work. I mean, it was all hard work, but when it's your life and you've lived that life for such a long time, you almost just become used to it. But now every morning I get out of bed, and I've just been doing this for 3 months, and I exercise every morning. Not much. I mean, compared to some of my friends who do triathlons and all sorts of things, but I do 15 minutes, half an hour of of exercise every morning.
Yeah.
And I remember once getting out of bed and thinking, when am I ever going to get out of bed and feel like I'm going to be able to attack the day?
Oh, yeah.
And now I do.
Oh, I'm so glad
that difference,
Yeah.
is huge.
Did you ever think you were going to die?
Yeah.
During those hard times, during that month?
There was one time, there's 2 occasions really. I had my first transplant and I was out, usually they say minimum of a month in hospital. So you have 7 days of chemotherapy to wipe your body out so it will accept the cells from a donor.
Right.
So when you have a stem cell transplant, somebody else, a living person, donates their cells to you. Sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it's a stranger.
Okay.
So you have chemotherapy to prepare you for that. And then you have your transplant at the end of week 1. And then you usually spend at least another 3 weeks in hospital until those cells find their home in your body and start to reproduce and you start to make blood properly again.
Okay.
So I did that and I got released from hospital after about a month. I managed about 2.5 weeks home. And then I was readmitted. And there was a period of 2 weeks where I wasn't very well at all. I had zero immune system, so I wasn't allowed out of the hospital. I had nothing at all. I was incredibly high risk. And
with COVID as well.
With COVID as well.
That's scary.
Yeah, with COVID. So I had very limited visiting because of COVID as well. I had one visitor for an hour a day. And because of the distance, I was in Newcastle, I wouldn't allow family members to do that every day. So I had visitors, I limited it to 2 or 3 times a week. So that then, I was up there. Clearly, I wasn't making blood again. I'd had my transplant. My transplant to me was my golden ticket to a normal life again, which really, even though I'd had some form of life in the years after diagnosis, it was never a full life. And I saw transplant as a real golden ticket to have a life again. I lost most of my 30s to dealing with either the physical or mental impact of the illness. So obviously, knowing that things weren't working, I was just absolutely devastated. And it got to a point where I picked up an infection.
Oh, no.
And when you have no immune system and you get an infection, what your body does is frightening. It's basically a ridiculous fever, and you shake to the point where I've got a video of it still. I can't believe I managed to take a video, but I took a video of the shaking. You have to get an injection, or you can choose to stop your body, because they're called Rigors basically. And on that night, I thought I wasn't going to make it. I've never told anyone. I have told very few people this. I certainly haven't told my family this. But I wrote a letter on my phone. Not a very long letter. It was about 2 sentences to my family, because I thought I wasn't going to make the night yet.
Oh, my goodness, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And did you end up, obviously you made it.
I made the night, yeah.
You made it.
The next night, I was admitted to intensive care.
Oh, goodness.
Luckily, I was a few hours away from being ventilated. The reason they took me to intensive care was I had an infection and they couldn't get any blood pressure reading from me. So I don't remember much of that period of time. I was heavily sedated. I was catheterised. I have some really random recollection of looking up, which is weird. I don't know whether I was close to dying. I've never really had a conversation with any of the medics about really how bad I was. But I remember looking up and just thinking, what's my mission? And it was like I was on it was really, really weird. And this happened over a period of time when I wasn't well at all. Anyway, I rallied. I come from a Catholic family. There was prayers going on all over Teesside and beyond for me, I think. And whether it's that, whatever it is, someone somewhere was looking after me. And I managed to be out of intensive care within 3 days and breathing for myself, back on the ward. Not very well at all. It was horrific.
Oh, my goodness.
So for 2 weeks after that, I then had a complication with fluid retention and was bedbound. I couldn't walk. And so the second time, I didn't really think I was going to die, but I'd had enough and I asked them to stop treatment. I just said, I'm done. This is too much. Too much. Physically. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't wash myself. I couldn't go to the toilet. I couldn't even, I'd have panic attacks because you have those buzzers on your, so I was always in a room on my own because of my immune system. And so it was me. And obviously the nurses, they were amazing. They became my second family up there in Freeman, but they couldn't be there all the time. And you have your buzzer, but obviously the buzzer sits on your bed. And so if that buzzer fell, I couldn't get to it. So the panic, of that was just absolutely horrific. So that I just felt so out of control. I'm a control freak as well, which doesn't help. And one of the big experienced doctors just came in and said, "What's all this? What are you saying about stopping treatment?" And I was on my own. There was my family weren't there all the time. They couldn't be there all the time because of COVID restrictions. So I used to get up on a morning and think, how am I going to do this day? And this particular day, I was just like. So she came in and said, "Lisa, we can fix you, but we need you to believe we can fix you. Please believe we can fix you." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." And every day, The problem was I couldn't get out of bed, so I had zero independence. And what was wrong with me, the fluid retention I had that was preventing me from walking, nobody knew what to do about it.
Yeah.
So nobody could help me. So I was just in my bed there was no progress for about 2 or 3 weeks. Then I finally got to see, I think she might have been a gynecologist actually, from another hospital in Newcastle, because gynecology was in the RVI, which is across town.
Right.
It took them a while to get over to see me. And I suppose that was the frustration as well, because you're here on a ward full of experts, but nobody knew what was wrong.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Like, if the great thing about transplant is, or any illness is, typically if something goes wrong, they can give you something to make it better. Not with everybody, and there's some really awful, tragic stories there. But this, I was already incredibly ill. My transplant had failed. We knew that. But I had this real barrier that nobody knew. And I'm like, how am I going to get anywhere, let alone through another transplant, if I can't move? Like, I'm not strong enough. So that level, mentally, I just couldn't see a way out.
Totally.
Couldn't see a way out at all. And, do you know, after 2 or 3 weeks, this lady from the RVI came, and her solution was, you just need to stand up. Just stand up. And I was like, really? And I couldn't really stand very well.
Yeah.
So I started, I had to go to the toilet on a commode, which is my worst nightmare going in there was losing control of the stuff that losing your dignity. And I had to go to the toilet on a commode. So every time I got up out of bed to go on the commode, supported, I would lean over the bed, like in an L shape, and just shift my weight between both feet.
Yeah, okay.
To start to lose some of the fluid that was sitting around my middle area.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I managed to take a few steps. Then the next day, I walked to the end of the bed. Then the next day, I walked to the end of my room. And I just gradually, and as soon as I knew there was a light,
Yeah.
even on the days I felt terribly ill, I did whatever I could to get stronger.
Yeah.
And that paid off hugely. Because within, I would say, a month of coming out of intensive care, I was walking up and down the ward 4 times a day, building my strength up, ready to do it all again.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
But that absolute, just the tiniest chink of hope.
Yeah.
And that light. And my blog that I started on Instagram at the beginning of my transplant journey, when I was first diagnosed in 2011, I was really closed about being ill. I thought people would think I was weak. I thought they'd feel sorry for me, and I didn't want any sympathy. I just wanted people to see me as I was before.
Yeah.
And when I relapsed, I flipped it, and I'm really, which is why I'm sat here, open about my journey now. And I blogged on Instagram and still do. And the absolute cornerstone of that blog is to look for the light. So every day when I did my post, I was always looking for what was good in that day. And I still do that every day now. And that's what really got me through. The problem was when I was bedbound and I couldn't move, like it was so hard to find any light at all. And I suppose that's when you have to work even harder to find it. And I did, I think, in the end. There was some really incredibly dark days, but that little chink of hope, and you can't underestimate just give someone a tiny bit of hope, and what that gives people like me when you're in that situation is huge. And now I try and do that with other people as best I can.
No, absolutely. That's so powerful. Bless you. You've been through hell.
Well, yeah, a bit.
Yeah. And then obviously you went through the transplant again.
Yeah.
I mean, how traumatic is the transplant anyway?
So the actual process itself, the transplant process, is incredibly underwhelming.
Right.
Most people everyone that has a transplant will have a central line fitted. So you don't get cannulated every day. You have a permanent line access somewhere. Okay. Might be in your arm, might be in your chest. So you've got a permanent tube in your body, and literally you can be hooked up at any time. So the cells arrive. Obviously, wonderful donor.
Yeah, goodness, you
Yeah.
must be so grateful.
Jess, she's gorgeous. We met last month. She's just the most. I mean, it's one thing someone saving your life, but it's another them being totally like. She'll be my forever friend because she's just my person. She's just like me.
You're
We're
a
just
part of
similar.
her.
Yeah. Well, we share the same blood in our
Yeah.
DNA now. Same DNA in our blood now. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. So her cells arrived, and obviously it was nerve-wracking because having gone through one and it failing and having such a journey over the previous 5 months, you think, what is this time? Is this going to be is this the one? And literally the bags arrive, the nurse hooks you up, you have a bit of pre-med to stop you reacting, and you just sit there.
Yeah.
And it's like having a blood transfusion.
Oh, okay,
Just
right.
like having a blood transfusion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was literally a bag of, looks like a bit pinker than normal blood. Stem
Okay,
cells are
yeah.
a bit pinker. And I had 2 bags. Jess kindly gave me about 8 million of her stem cells.
Wow.
And literally, I had my family all on Zoom. And the nurses all came in with a bottle of Nosecco. And the transplant happened, and then you just sit and wait for the cells to find their home and hopefully stay there.
Yeah.
And they did.
Oh, I'm so pleased. And do you feel any differently to kind of when you're having a transfusion? Does it feel like almost there's new cells in you?
Yeah, no, not really, not at all. Some people can have funny reactions to it. I think that my first transplant I had, the cells were frozen, and they have a preservative in them,
Okay.
and they made me cough when they were
Yes,
going in.
I've heard of that.
And it makes you smell a sweet corn, apparently. So when you've had a transplant and a nurse comes in, they'll be like, "Oh, you had your transplant, didn't you? Because you stink and you smell a sweet corn." So the other people, but for me, there was no different, really. No,
Yeah.
no. I know. Just over the moon that I got the opportunity to.
Yeah. Because imagine if you hadn't. Like, I mean, would you still be alive now if you hadn't had your transplant?
I don't think so. I was literally being kept alive from my first transplant failing. I was in ICU mid-November 2020. I probably got out of bed beginning of December and started to regain my strength. But during that whole time, when I came out of ICU, they told me that my transplant had failed. They knew that it had failed by that point. So they then spent the whole time following that keeping me alive with antibiotics. I was on antibiotics 4 times a day. I was on a blood product called granulocytes, which are quite unusual, and it's basically white cells. So they were giving me somebody else's white cells to give me some immunity against infection. The problem is with white cells is they don't have a long shelf life. They die off, I think it's, if I'm right, within a day.
Okay.
So I was having, I think, those cells 5 times a week, and every bag was about £1,000 a bag. I mean, the NHS, I mean, I know they're on their knees, but without them and my donor, I wouldn't be here. Absolutely not.
My goodness. And yeah, it's just crazy to think that 100 bags of blood.
Over
100.
So red cells, the granulocytes I've just mentioned, which are very rare, not used often unless you're in dire straits like I was, and platelets as well.
Yeah. Goodness me. It just shows the power of donating blood. And
People don't realise, though.
No.
Until you are in that situation.
Yeah.
Blood donation's one thing, but stem cell donation it's crazy. We've got 3% of the UK population are registered as stem cell donors. Mm-hmm. The whole population potentially could be. I mean, there's some exceptions. You've got to be typically between the ages of 16 and 55. Mm-hmm. I think you stay on the register till you're about 60.
Yeah.
But we definitely got lots and lots of work to do in that space because I always say, if it was you or a family member that needed a transplant to survive, you would grab it with both hands, wouldn't you?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
But I just think a lot of it's just lack of awareness. People don't realise, like with blood, until you need it and you can't make your own, you don't really realise how important it is.
No, absolutely. And so do you think you had a near-death experience when you were looking? Did you say you were looking above? And
yeah, it's so great. Yeah, a few times I was out of it, but I I can see it now. I was just looking up. And it's funny because I was there when my grandma passed away. And the week running up to her passing, they always say you look up, and she was looking up and reaching.
Yeah.
And it was I don't know whether it was near death, what it was, but I remember it very clearly that it was up there. And what's my mission? What's my mission? What am I trying to do here?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing I was trying to stay alive, obviously, desperately.
Yeah.
But I was completely out of it. I went into intensive care on the Monday, early hours of Monday, I think. No, early hours of Tuesday morning, mid-November it was. And I came out back to the ward on the Friday.
Wow. And since then, have you discovered your personal mission?
Yeah, I think, as in my why.
Yeah, just kind of that message, just when you were looking above and seeing it.
Oh, so what's my... Yeah, I see what you mean. I think my why, if you like now, it's twofold really, is to stay healthy. And I think a lot of us take our minds and bodies for granted until they give up on us.
Yes.
And we have an absolute responsibility to look after them. So before all else now comes my health.
Good.
And alongside that, if I can use my experience to bring a light to others that are stuck in the dark like I was, then that's what I'll do.
Oh, that's so lovely. And you mentioned you worked a lot, 70 hours a week. You mentioned that you think that was a contributory factor to help making you feel so poorly or exasperating the condition.
Yeah, completely.
I take it you don't work that hard anymore. I'd like to hear you don't.
I don't. I work, if I can, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I try and... I mean, who on earth invented a 5-day working week anyway? I mean, 5 and 2, it's just... Where's the balance there? It's ridiculous. So I'm a big fan of this movement towards a 4-day week. I think there's a big movement there. But no, I have now been for about 18 months-ish become self-employed, and the simple reason I am self-employed is because then I have complete control over not only what I do, but who I work with, when I work, so that I make the choices that allow me to be healthy, nobody else.
Yeah. And saying you're going to stop working as much is one thing. Sometimes they're deep-rooted habits. I'm speaking from experience. How do you make sure that you don't overwork it?
Well, exactly. I don't, because I've been in here working all day today. So I don't. I've got the intention is there, and I am open and honest with clients that my preferred working days are Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. I never respond to messages outside of working hours on evenings and weekends. And I'm transparent in that I don't work Mondays and Fridays. However, sometimes you've just got to be a bit flexible. But what I do, Charlotte, is I pulled a 10-hour day last Wednesday, right? Which is, in my past life, a 10-hour day was nothing.
Yeah, it's an easy one.
Nothing. And people, I think I did a LinkedIn post about it, actually, or maybe a post on my blog on Instagram. And I get that there's people probably outside of here that do 10-hour days, 7 days a week like I used to. But for me now, that's a massive achievement to have, been able to cope with a 10-hour day. But what I did to enable myself to do that is I bookended it. So I made sure that the days, knowing that was coming, I went easy on myself in the run-up, and the day following, I had a very, very easy day. So I will never just hammer at it all the time. And I'm very conscious and intentional about what I do. And when I set up my self-employed, I set up with my why, if you like, and I know that's really quite overused now, but my why is to remain healthy and bring light to others. My mission, if you like. I like that.
No, I love it.
But in amongst all that, these are my almost non-negotiables. So I hold myself to account. So you're never going to be perfect. I'm never going to get it right all the time. But having that, being tuned into that is I think, really helpful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's like a benchmark, or it's a guide to go back to. And what I've actually just started doing, I've done some coaching I'm training to be a coach actually, but I have had some one-to-one coaching for the last I finished up last month or the month before. And one of the things that I've started to do is build in time at the end of every month to reflect.
Yes.
On the last month.
I started doing that.
Have you?
Yeah.
And I haven't done it yet. But it's in my diary to start doing next week at the end of July against my non-negotiables. So, yes, I might not get it right, but if I'm reflecting actively on that, then I can intentionally make adaptations.
Yes. No, I started at the start of the year. It was going well, and then my life went a bit crazy, but I'm starting doing it again.
Yeah.
And it's really good to refocus you, because before that, I just do start of year, end of year, and there's a long gap in between.
Totally.
So that's a great idea. And of course, you can't bring light to others if you haven't got your own light inside of you.
Exactly.
So you've got to keep that safe.
And that's huge, because I used to think, so my life, I had three, I had work, family and friends, and my health. There were sort of my three areas.
Yeah.
So before illness and right through a lot of my illness before I relapsed, work came first, family and friends came second, and my health came third, last.
Yeah.
Right? Now, my health comes first, before my family and friends.
Because it has to.
And work comes third.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't like work. It's not that I don't work hard, because I am a workaholic, self-confessed. But when you're ill, you're no use to anybody, your family and friends, or least of all, a client or an employer. So by looking after yourself, you're making sure you have that energy to give to time with people and to give to a job that hopefully you love.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, definitely. I found out the hard way on a number of occasions that I need to put myself first. And you just feel selfish doing it, but it's not. You can't help others unless
you're totally
useless.
And when I was sat in that hospital bed, to the point literally where I couldn't walk, couldn't go to the toilet myself, couldn't shower myself, I was totally useless, completely useless. And the only way you can make sure, or at least give yourself the best chance of that not being the case, is to look after yourself every day.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about work and employers. Was your employer supportive when you were going through your illness?
Well, were they? When I got diagnosed, my career in education did that. So I was on senior team in a big secondary school. Not core senior team. I was on sort of quite a fast track to leadership program, if you like. I was the equivalent, for people that know education speak, I was the equivalent of what you would call an associate assistant head teacher today. So it's somebody that's just on the cusp of stepping into senior leadership.
Okay.
I'd done that within probably about in my fifth year of teaching.
Wow.
So I was big secondary school, had a lot of additional responsibility. I'd had high impact. I'd gone in to, interestingly, my own secondary school that I'd been a pupil at, to turn around their IT and business department. They were my subjects. I had quite a big impact there. We got results up to being one of the best departments in the school very quickly. So I had a proven track record, and I stepped on to the senior team in this sort of developmental pathway. So absolutely flying. So when I say about the diagnosis being like a rug pulled from under me, it literally was. I mean, I was the first in the car park on a morning, one of the last. I was getting thrown out by the caretakers on a night, that type of thing. So initially, when I came back after my diagnosis, my employers were incredibly supportive. Nothing was too much trouble. They'd let me come and go as I pleased. They'd cover me. There was no pressure to do anything. They just sort of let me say what I needed, which was amazing. Yeah. So that first year I was in treatment a long time, on and off a lot, so I didn't really engage fully in school life, if you like. I was there, but I was off a lot. Yeah, so I was in and out, couldn't give it my all. And then after my second treatment, I went back with the intention of, I'm back now. Things are going well. I'm not on transfusions anymore. I've been having transfusions for a year, and all that's good. I'm ready to resume. And I went in for a meeting about my return to work with the head teacher at the time. And he told me that my position on the senior team that September, so the new academic year, was no longer because I hadn't proven myself in the year that I'd been absent.
Right.
So not only was I seriously ill and in recovery, that was a long recovery. My nurse when I was diagnosed said, "It's a marathon, this, Lisa, not a sprint. You're not just going to have treatment and be okay. It's it's over years." So then to have my employer tell me that my career path I'd just hit a dead end was soul-destroying, completely soul-destroying.
And did you feel that you were still achieving the same output? Maybe you were working less hours, but you were still achieving the same.
No, because I'd been in treatment.
Yeah.
I'd been in treatment. What I couldn't understand was how another human being could stand in front of me, tell me I hadn't proven myself, and take any opportunity away from me, at least for the foreseeable future, to do what I loved. And what at the time I felt was all I had, really. I had family and stuff, but I was massively career driven. So when I got diagnosed, my first thought was, when can I get back to work? You know? So I just couldn't believe that he wasn't prepared to give me the opportunity to almost like repeat the year.
Yeah. Oh, so that wasn't an option?
No.
Oh, right.
Oh, no. You are going from being on a sort of middle leadership to senior leadership transition, you're going back to middle leadership.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you could then have another go.
No option.
Oh, goodness.
No option. There was other people that had been present for the whole time that stepped up. There was another person that chose not to, and then there was me that was told that you weren't allowed, that it wasn't happening. I didn't have, in hindsight, I wish I didn't have the energy. I was in very early stages of recovery to challenge. I just took it as massive rejection, and then spent the next several years trying to prove myself even harder.
Right.
With a glass ceiling that wasn't moving.
Which was probably even more detrimental to your recovery or your health at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they did, so it's unfair to say they were completely unsupportive, because what they did allow me to do was change my job role to do less.
Okay.
But that then, I probably lost about 40% of my pay as well. So my big frustration right throughout has been good people that are good at what they do get ill. And just because we're physically ill doesn't mean that we can't do. It might mean we need a slightly different path to get to the same end point, because my ambition never went. I desperately wanted to be a head teacher or and I was good. I was good at what I did. But that constant sort of feeling like you're not good enough when you're already in a very vulnerable state, I just couldn't believe another human being could stand in front of me and say, "Sorry, no, that's the end of your road." And I mean, there's a case for discrimination there, I think, potentially, but I just wasn't in a position to pursue that at that point. And I mean, the damage it's done, I've talked about it just in recent months with my coach, confidence-wise, the damage that's done. Because I was flying. I was potentially arrogant, really. Thought I was invincible, very arrogant before I got ill. And then, obviously, fell from a great height overnight. And then, yes, they supported me to change my job, but I felt like there was a shelf and they'd put me on the shelf in the corner. Well, yes, she can do this. We'll let her do this. We'll let her do that, but she'll take a pay cut. She's never going to be that again. Certainly not under their leadership. And other people did do that I was once above. That was really hard. They never told me I wasn't good. They never. So if there'd have been conversations like, "Actually, Lisa, you're not delivering here," or "You're not," but there was never that. It was just that one conversation. You haven't proven yourself. And no matter which way I tried to get past the ceiling, it just never happened, to the point where I did get a little bit more responsibility, but I was never back on senior leadership. And I got to the point where I ended up relapsing and I came out of teaching altogether. But I just really think it's important for employers to bear in mind, if someone is ill, it's not their fault. Their ambition hasn't changed, I'm sure.
No.
And if you can, and I know it's difficult resourcing wise and stuff, and you've got a job to do, and if someone can't do it, someone else has to. But I felt very much that my career path we could have found a way together, rather than them going, actually, no, sorry, this is a dead end now. You go down that way, which is less money, less responsibility, not really an opportunity to progress in the way you wanted.
Yeah, I don't get that. It's almost like the system's broken because, I can understand them saying take a step back for a bit, but then as soon as, you're ready, we'll put you right back on that track. I don't get that.
No, it wasn't. And like I say, there been an issue with my performance, but I always had impact, whatever I did.
Yeah.
So it was, I was really, and that really did some real damage. And I just think, yes, if somebody's got an issue that prevents them from doing a job in the way they might have done previously, that's fine. But do whatever you need to do for the good of the business. Do it with them. Don't do it to them.
Yes, that's a really important
message. And I felt
message.
very much that it had been done to me.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I might have agreed with them.
Yeah.
You know what, actually, this
right.
isn't... Yeah, but it wasn't. It was just, you haven't proven yourself. This is the end of the road. Off you go.
Brutal.
Yeah.
You didn't need that on top of everything else as well. And then, we talked about you being in hospital during COVID, not many visitors, but you'd also mentioned that before that, you'd been through a divorce, a marriage breakdown.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So, my marriage... Part of the reason I think I was a workaholic is twofold. It was because my marriage broke down, I became even more of a workaholic. But before I got married, I failed an exam. Well, not failed. I got a D in an exam in one of my A-level modules. And I'm a perfectionist, and I didn't like that.
Yeah.
So then I was determined that would never happen again. So I guess from my A-levels, I've always been that's, I suppose, what's made me a workaholic. My dad was a very, very hard worker. Used to work very long hours when I was a kid, so I was exposed to that as well. But I got married. Me and my ex-husband, we'd been together from year 11 at school. So, and we got married after about 10 or 11 years, I think.
Wow.
I was in my mid-20s, and then we separated a year later. So, I mean, I worked incredibly hard, which meant I could have probably made more effort in the relationship. We were together a long time, and my advice to younger people now is play the field a bit, because I suppose with my ex-husband, I think he'd had a couple of relationships before me, but we're only in school and you don't know any different.
Yeah.
So I didn't know whether the grass was greener or not. I didn't know any better. There were certain things I put up with that I shouldn't have done. We should have never, ever got married in the first place, but I just didn't know any better. And in the end, he had feelings for somebody else. I found out, and that was the end of that after, I think it was 11 and a half years. And I mean, I was over it within, 6-8 weeks. I was all right. I mean, I was genuinely devastated at first, and I'd seen it coming. He said I was paranoid, but I was right, I don't suppose I was surprised, but I was disappointed that he just didn't put me out my misery and tell me. And one of my, I suppose, core values is being honest with people. Sometimes people might think I'm a bit brutal. Once upon a time I was bolshy as well. I'm not now. I'm much more mellow. But I just think sometimes, being honest is the kindest thing you can do.
Absolutely.
And, he said to me when he left, well, how do I tell you that? And I'm like, well, it's much kinder than let me think I'm crazy, And it's fine now. He did me a favour. I'm really glad I'm not married to him, He's not a bad person. He made some stupid decisions, and I'm sure he'd be the first to hold his hand up and go, I made some... And he's actually said to me since, I'm sorry, and I'm like, it's fine, because I absolutely would never ever want to be married to him right now or any time really since we separated. But it did certainly give me a hole to fill.
Okay.
And I already worked a lot, but that void, because I was then alone a lot, gave me more of a hole to fill and more time to devote to work to pursue that career dream at the top of the tree. You know, I was convinced I was going to be a head teacher or whatever very quickly, you know, a young head teacher. And obviously I got ill and the rest's history.
And have you moved on since?
In terms of relationships? So I've dated people. I've had relationships that probably with people that I shouldn't have had relationships with because they're not available. I haven't, because of my illness, been as emotionally available as I could be. So, yes, I've dated, but not really had a serious relationship since my marriage broke down, which is a very, very long time ago.
Mm-hmm. And would you like to meet someone?
So, yes, is the short answer. However, because of what's happened to me, I love my life. And I feel that the perspective I've got, even though it's come from a really, really rough journey, is a massive, massive gift. I feel hugely privileged to be able to wake up every day and live my life in HD, Technicolor, whatever you want to call it. And if somebody is not going to make that brighter or going to add value, I'm all right, thanks.
Brilliant.
I've got loads of friends. I'm busy constantly. I've got a small but amazing, gorgeous, gorgeous family. We're very close. And if someone's going to come in and add to that, and I really do genuinely hope they do one day. Bless my mum. She says to me, he's just round the corner, you know, Lisa. I'm like, Mum, you've been saying that for about 10 years. And there have been a few round the corner, but they haven't. And particularly since my transplant, I guess my bar's been raised even more because I'm not prepared. I just feel so lucky to be here that unless someone's going to make me feel even luckier, then I'm not interested.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And it's really hard, though, Charlotte, I think now, to meet people. Because since COVID, people don't go out as much.
No.
My friends are all, you know, we're all early 40s. They've got families. I haven't got a family either. So we do go out. I'm out a lot, but I might be going for dinner with friends. We might go to gigs, or not the sort of, you know, when you go back to your 20s, even early 30s, where people are out and about and meeting and stuff. It's just not like that, is it?
Yeah,
so,
it's very different.
Yeah. So I don't know. And obviously I've been out of circulation a lot with being ill.
Yeah.
So even though I've not been really ill since 2011, I haven't been in circulation, if you like, as much as the average person.
Yeah. Oh, bless you. And does it bother you that you don't have children?
Yes, it does. Not so much. I've reached acceptance with it now. But yes, it bothers me. I fully expected before my marriage broke down. I can remember we were in a car going from a wedding on Yarm High Street. It was about 3 months before we split, I think. Might not even have been that long. And I remember saying I'm going to have children by the time I'm 30. I was about, I want to say, 27. And that was absolutely the plan. Obviously, then we separated, got divorced. And I was ill within, I think, two or 3 years after the separation. So we got divorced. We separated. The divorce took a while to come through. In that period, I just flung myself wholeheartedly into work, got the promotion. I was like, this is me. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm invincible. I'm not even 30 yet. I've got my whole life ahead of me.
Yeah.
Then illness hits. I found a lot of the time, even though I wasn't really, really unwell, I wasn't well enough to do lots of stuff. I had to be really careful about my energy levels and stuff. I was trying still, my focus was still on that glass ceiling at work. I also, after my diagnosis, got a big problem with anxiety and panic attacks because of not being open and honest. And not telling people what was wrong with me and trying to
Okay.
front it up.
Right.
So I was dealing with an awful lot, not only physically but mentally, and I just really wasn't in a good space, good space to do that.
Yeah.
So in amongst all that, where do you fit kids? So I did actually, when I was about 35, people used to say to me, why don't you try and do it by yourself? And at that point, there was no hint of me relapsing. I was doing really well. I went and had some tests to check my fertility, and they were like, you're fine. You know, the treatment hadn't affected my fertility. There was a risk of relapse if I'd have fallen pregnant.
Right.
So it was always like, oh, Derek, do I want to take the risk? And then before I think I started relapsing at about 30, I think I was 37, maybe. Went to transplant. By the time I'm out of transplant, I'm into my 40s. I'm on my own still. I absolutely wouldn't put myself in a position to have a baby on my own. I don't think I would be allowed because of my
Right.
health. It wouldn't
Okay.
be fair on a child because there are risks for me to, for example, I'm at higher risk of having blood cancer in the long term.
Okay.
So I've now got to a point where I accept that it's not my path, and I've got lots of other things to be grateful for. And that, yes, it's not where I expected to be, but I'm lucky in so many other ways. I've got 2 absolutely gorgeous nieces. My brother's got 2 girls. And so I'm like a second mum to them, and that's good enough for me.
Oh, that's lovely. And it can go 2 ways. I know people who can't have kids that just can't bear to be around any children,
Yeah.
and rightly so, if that's the way they feel.
Yeah.
And then some people that just embrace children like they're their own. I take it you've chosen that route.
Depends who it is. So my nieces, I've got quite a lot of godchildren from close friends, fine. Certain situations where it's very childlike, kids' parties, colleagues that are meeting up with their children where I don't know the kids very well,
Yeah.
I will politely decline.
Yes.
I find those situations difficult, but if it's kids that I have known all their lives and they're like family to me, all day long, love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so lovely. And I on LinkedIn there was a comment once about saying that if you need something doing, ask a working mum or something to get it done.
Yeah.
And you commented saying it's not just, working mums. There's other females who perhaps can't have children for whatever reason who are still just as good at working. And
Yeah.
And I thought, good for you saying that. Do you feel society kind of likes to pigeonhole people and say, oh, right, you're in that category now, you follow these rules?
It's funny because in the education sector, I think 75-ish% of the workforce are women. So I've never, ever felt discriminated against for being a woman. There was never really any expectation because there was a big age spectrum of people to be parents or not. I've only literally been back in the business world for about 18 months. And there's a huge focus, particularly around the Tees Valley, about women in business and giving women their voice and platform and all that type of thing. But which I'm all for that, even though I've not experienced any discrimination for being female. But what I do find in a lot of these forums is that the people delivering the event or making the posts on LinkedIn assume that women my age, are parents. And I actually looked into it because I find it quite triggering, if I'm honest. And there's 20% of women in their 40s at the last census aren't mums.
Yeah.
And yes, I don't doubt that if you're a mum, you get shit done. 100%. And I take my hat off to anyone that's a mum because I also think there's a reason that I'm not, because I'm not sure my body now would be able to cope with the worry and the stress that being a parent brings. I get that, and I genuinely believe there's a reason I am not. But I also find it really frustrating when people just assume, well, we've all got our families, and we've got, well, actually, no, I haven't. And that's hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it's very, and I know you can't include everyone in you. You can be fully inclusive, but sometimes in conversation, assumptions, just come up there's no intention. And that woman that posted on LinkedIn, she won't have intended to upset people like me. And she had a load of positive comments from mums that are like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, like I say, hats off to the mums, but I do think it's important to realise that there's people like me sat here going, we're not mums, but we'd have loved to have been, and we still do stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff as well.
Yeah, and I was like, good for you, Lisa. I need to talk to this lady.
Yeah.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. It's
okay.
been amazing to share
okay.
your insight into so many difficult situations that you've been through. Yeah. And I love your personal mission now. Do you want to just repeat it one more time?
So, health at the centre of everything. If you haven't got your health, you're no good to anybody. And while I do that, if I can bring light to other people, then I'm happy.
Oh, it's so lovely. We haven't quite finished yet. We've got the regular questions.
Go on then.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being worst, 10 being the best, you have to rate yourself at the following things. So, how good looking are you?
So once upon a time before I was ill, I just said a 10. That's how arrogant I was. On a 7.5.
Oh, I love the arrogance, though.
No, I'm definitely not a 10. I'm not a 10. I thought I was. I was just ridiculously arrogant.
Oh, I love that self-belief, though.
No, not anymore.
You're as good looking as you think you are.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
it.
And it depends what day it is.
Totally. Yeah,
or time of day.
Yeah, yeah. How funny are you?
On a scale of 1 to 10? Mm-hmm. 6, slightly above average.
Okay. How good at cooking are you?
6, slightly better than average.
Okay. Singing?
My parents are both singers.
Oh.
Yeah, but I don't carry... I can hold a tune, but bang average 5.
Okay. Alcohol drinking, do you drink? Or are you,
I do
not?
drink.
Okay.
I do drink. I'm a very sensible drinker, always been a sensible drinker. So on a scale of 1 to 10, as in 10, you can absolutely put it away.
Yeah.
No, I'm a 1 wine, 1 water person. So I would say I'm a below average, like 3 or 4 out of 10.
That's sensible, though. Parenting. Fur baby?
Oh, good one. I am the best dog mum in the world. He's like my baby. 10, 11, 12 out of 10.
Oh, an auntie?
Yeah, not as good, I wouldn't say. I tell you what, I really struggled with that when I was ill, at not being able to be a good auntie.
Oh, mm-hmm.
I 8.
Okay. Friend?
Getting better. I would say 9, because I'm kinder now than I ever was, but I need to listen more and talk less.
Okay. Intelligence?
My general knowledge is shocking. My common sense is okay. Intelligent. I'm fairly intelligent, though. 7.5.
Okay. Kindness?
9. I'm getting much better. If you'd have asked me 15 years ago, I'd have been probably a 2 or a 3.
Do you think going through adversity makes you kinder?
All day long.
I agree.
All day long.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have friends now that sometimes will be a bit judgmental, say things, look at people, make comments, and I just try, and I don't get it right all the time, and say, no. Mm-hmm. It's what they might be like this. Let them be them. That, you know. I mean, I don't. If people are downright rude or nasty, like I get really annoyed with people that aren't kind.
Yeah.
But I try my best to see the best in people, if I can.
Lovely. And again, this one might be a difficult one to answer if you're not in a relationship, but I shouldn't be judgmental, actually. How good at sex are you?
Well, it depends on who it's with.
Yeah.
I would absolutely say at times in my life I've been a 0. And other times I've been a 10.
Yeah.
So right across the range
a
of
really
spec-
good answer.
But right now, not at all.
Same. Someone just asked me about that score, and I was like, well,
0.
yeah, I can't comment right now.
Well, it's not even, it's an NA, not applicable right now.
Absolutely. Oh, Lisa, thank you so much.
It's
Some really
okay.
difficult questions there.
It's all right.
Thank you.